Discover how ancient Roman manipulation techniques control your thoughts, purchases, and life choices through modern AI and social media. Learn the psychological archaeology method to break free from unconscious programming and reclaim your authentic life decisions. Once you see this, there's no going back to ignorant bliss. This video can change your life dramatically. Stop scrolling right now, because what I'm about to reveal will shatter everything you think you know about free will and personal control. The elites don't want this information getting out, and you'll understand why in just a few minutes. What if I told you that 99% of your daily decisions aren't actually yours? What if there's an ancient system of manipulation so sophisticated that it's been controlling humans' behavior for over 2,000 years, and the people at the top know exactly how to pull your strings? Here's the kicker. This isn't some conspiracy theory. This is documented psychological warfare, and the proof is hiding in plain sight. But here's what really pisses me off. While you're struggling to make ends meet, fighting internal battles, and wondering why life feels so damn hard, there's a small group of people who've mastered these techniques and are using them to control your thoughts, your purchases, and your entire life direction. Today, you're going to learn their playbook. You're going to discover the ancient manipulation tactics that have been refined over centuries. More importantly, you're going to learn how to break free from them. But I'm warning you, once you see this, you can't unsee it. Your relationships, your job, even your own thoughts will never look the same again. Are you ready to find out who's really in control of your life? Because what you're about to discover will either set you free or terrify you. Let's dive in. Let me paint you a picture that's going to make your blood boil. Right now, as you're watching this video, there are psychological triggers being activated in your brain that you're completely unaware of. The way this thumbnail was designed, the words I'm using, even the pace of my speech, it's all been calculated to keep you hooked. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Think about yesterday. How many decisions did you make that felt completely your own? What you ate for breakfast, what you wore, what you bought, who'd you talk to, even what you thought about. Here's the brutal truth. Most of those weren't your decisions at all. Let me tell you about Julie, a 42-year-old woman. Smart woman, successful career, thought she had her life figured out. Then she discovered she'd been living according to a script that wasn't her own. Her morning routine, her career choices, her relationship patterns, even her fears and anxieties. All of it had been shaped by manipulation techniques so subtle, she never saw them coming. When Julie finally woke up to what was happening, she was furious. I felt like a puppet, she told me. 20 years of thinking I was making my own choices, and I was just dancing to someone else's tune. But here's what really shocked her. The puppet masters weren't some shadowy organization. They were her own family, her employers, her society, and most disturbingly, her own subconscious mind that had been programmed from birth. This is happening to millions of people right now. They think they're living their own lives, but they're actually following ancient patterns of control that have been perfected over millennia. And the people who understand these patterns, they're the ones running the show while everyone else stumbles around in the dark. Here's where this gets really disturbing. The manipulation techniques controlling your life today aren't some modern invention. They're ancient psychological warfare tactics that have been refined and perfected over thousands of years. Let me introduce you to Marcus, a Roman politician from 200 AD who wrote a secret manual on mass psychological control. This manual was so effective, so dangerous, that it was banned and supposedly destroyed. But copies survived, hidden in private libraries and passed down through generations of power brokers. Marcus discovered something terrifying about human psychology. Give people the illusion of choice while controlling the options, and they'll willingly surrender their freedom. He called it the golden cage principle. Make the prison so comfortable that people defend their captivity. Sound familiar? That's because the same techniques Marcus used to control Roman citizens are being used on you right now. Your smartphone addiction? That's engineered using principles from his manual? Your shopping habits? Controlled by psychological triggers he documented 1,800 years ago. Your political opinions? Shaped by manipulation tactics he perfected on the Roman masses. But here's what really pisses me off. While Marcus's techniques were being refined in Rome, Similar systems were being developed independently in ancient China, Egypt, and India. These weren't isolated discoveries. This was a global pattern of psychological control that emerged wherever human societies became complex enough to require mass manipulation. The Chinese called it the art of invisible influence. The Egyptians called it the sacred deception. But they all discovered the same fundamental truth: humans can be programmed like computers if you know the right codes. Fast forward to today, and these ancient manipulation techniques have been weaponized with modern technology. The people using them aren't evil masterminds in dark rooms. They're marketers, politicians, social media algorithms, and even well-meaning parents and teachers who've been programmed themselves. Now let me show you how this ancient playbook is being used to control your life in ways that would make Marcus himself jealous. The sophistication level today is absolutely mind-blowing. Take Netflix, for example. You think you're choosing what to watch? But their algorithm is using psychological profiling techniques that trace back to ancient Roman crowd control methods. They know exactly when you're most vulnerable to suggestion, what emotional states make you binge watch, how to keep you scrolling until 2 a.m., even when you're exhausted. But Netflix is amateur hour compared to what's happening on social media. Jennifer, a 38-year-old teacher from Ohio, she thought she was just sharing family photos on Facebook. What she didn't realize was that every click, every pause, every emoji reaction was being analyzed by artificial intelligence systems, trained on ancient psychological manipulation principles. The AI learned that Jennifer felt insecure about her appearance, worried about her children's future, and craved validation from others. So it started feeding her content designed to amplify these insecurities while simultaneously offering products and ideologies as solutions. Within 6 months, Jennifer had spent $2,000 on beauty products she didn't need, joined to political movements that contradicted her actual values, and developed anxiety disorders she'd never had before. When Jennifer finally figured out what was happening, she was devastated. "I thought I was connecting with friends," she said. "I didn't realize I was being psychologically dissected and rebuilt according to someone else's agenda." Here's the really sick part. The people running these systems don't see themselves as manipulators. They've convinced themselves they're improving user experience or providing personalized content. They're so deep in their own programming that they don't even realize. They're using psychological warfare tactics on billions of people. But the worst part, your own family and friends are unknowingly participating in your manipulation. Every time they share a post, make a comment, or even have a conversation with you, they're potentially triggering psychological programs that were installed in your mind years or even decades ago. Let me get brutally honest about what this manipulation is costing you personally. I'm talking about real damage to your actual life, your relationships, your happiness, and your potential. Meet David, a 45-year-old construction foreman who thought he was a strong, independent guy who made his own decisions. Then he discovered that his chronic anger issues, his failed relationships, and his financial struggles weren't character flaws. They were the predictable results of psychological programming he'd been subjected to since childhood. David's father had been emotionally unavailable, not because he was a bad man, but because he'd been programmed by his generation's version of these manipulation techniques. David's school system had used behavioral modification methods that taught him to seek external validation rather than developing internal confidence. His social circle had been shaped by media consumption that glorified toxic masculinity patterns. By age 45, David was trapped in cycles of behavior that felt like his personality, but were actually learned responses to psychological manipulation. His relationships failed because he'd been programmed to equate love with control. His finances suffered because he'd been programmed to associate spending with emotional relief. His health declined because he'd been programmed to use food and alcohol as coping mechanisms. When David finally understood what had happened to him, he went through what I call the awakening rage. He was furious at everyone who had participated in his programming: his parents, his teachers, his employers, his friends, even himself for not seeing it sooner. But here's what's really tragic. David's story isn't unique. Millions of people are living lives that aren't actually theirs. following scripts they didn't write, pursuing goals that don't serve them, and wondering why they feel empty and frustrated, despite having everything they thought they wanted. The manipulation runs so deep that most people can't tell the difference between their authentic desires and their programmed responses. They think they want a bigger house because that's what success looks like, not realizing they've been psychologically conditioned to equate material possessions with self-worth. This is what keeps people stuck in jobs they hate, relationships that drain them, and life patterns that make them miserable. They're not living their own lives. They're acting out psychological programs that were installed without their consent. Now here's the good news. Once you understand how these manipulation techniques work, you can't be controlled by them anymore. It's like learning magic tricks. Once you see how the illusion works, it loses all its power over you. Let me tell you about Jill, a 41-year-old accountant who used these insights to completely transform her life. When Jill first learned about psychological manipulation, she was skeptical. "I'm too smart to be manipulated," she said. But when she started paying attention to her own thought patterns and decision-making processes, she was shocked by what she discovered. Jill realized that her career choice hadn't been based on her interests or talents. It had been shaped by family expectations and social programming about what constituted a respectable job for women. Her relationship patterns weren't based on love and compatibility. They were repetitions of dysfunctional dynamics she'd learned from watching her parents. Even her daily habits weren't her own. Her morning routine, her entertainment choices, her spending patterns, her social activities, all of it had been influenced by psychological manipulation techniques she'd never recognized. But here's where Jill's story gets exciting. Instead of feeling defeated by this knowledge, she used it as a roadmap to freedom. She started something I call psychological archaeology, carefully examining each area of her life to determine what was authentically hers versus what had been programmed. The process wasn't easy. Maria had to confront uncomfortable truths about herself and the people in her life. She had to make difficult changes that confused and sometimes angered those around her. But within 18 months, Jill had created a life that was genuinely her own. She left her accounting job and started a pottery business that actually aligned with her talents and interests. She ended a relationship that had been based on codependency rather than genuine compatibility. She developed new friendships with people who supported her authentic self rather than her programmed persona. Most importantly, Jill learned to recognize manipulation attempts in real time and respond with conscious choice rather than automatic reaction. She became what I call psychologically sovereign, immune to the subtle control techniques that keep most people trapped. The techniques Jill used aren't complicated, but they do require courage and commitment. You have to be willing to question everything, even beliefs and behaviors that feel fundamental to who you are. So here's the moment of truth. You now know that most of your life has been shaped by psychological manipulation techniques that trace back thousands of years. You understand that the people controlling these systems aren't necessarily evil, but they're definitely profiting from your unconsciousness. The question is, what are you going to do about it? You have two choices. You can close this video, go back to your regular routine, and pretend you never learned any of this. Most people choose this option because the truth is uncomfortable and change is scary. They'd rather stay in their comfortable prison than face the challenge of true freedom. Or you can choose the path that Jill and David chose, the path of conscious awakening and deliberate self-determination. This path isn't easy, but it's the only way to live a life that's authentically your own. Here's what the journey looks like. First, you start paying attention to your own thoughts and behaviors with forensic curiosity. When you feel an urge to buy something, ask yourself, is this desire coming from me, or am I being manipulated? When you have an emotional reaction, pause and investigate. Is this response appropriate to the situation, or am I acting out a programmed pattern? Second, you begin the process of psychological archaeology I mentioned earlier. Look at every major area of your life, your career, your relationships, your beliefs, your habits, your goals, and ask yourself, did I choose this consciously, or was I influenced by manipulation techniques? Third, you start making deliberate changes based on your authentic preferences, rather than your programmed responses. This is where things get interesting, because you'll discover desires and talents you never knew you had. The people in your life might not understand these changes, They might even resist them because your awakening threatens their own psychological programming. But remember, their discomfort with your growth is their problem, not yours. Let me leave you with this thought. Every day you spend living according to someone else's script is a day you're not living your own life. Every decision you make based on psychological manipulation is a betrayal of your authentic self. The techniques I've shared today are just the beginning. There's so much more to discover about psychological sovereignty and conscious living. If this resonates with you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Yes, because I'll be diving deeper into these topics in future videos. Your freedom is worth fighting for. Your authentic life is worth discovering. The question is, are you ready to begin the journey? The choice, for perhaps the first time in your life, is entirely yours.